Admiral Drahorn adjusted his ceremonial purple sash for the third time that morning, because apparently looking important was more exhausting than actually being important. The Zeltharian Empire's most decorated military leader stood 7 feet tall, with skin the color of old pewter and eyes that glowed like dying stars. His forearms gestured dramatically as he addressed the Galactic Council, each movement calculated to remind everyone present of his supposed superiority. "Esteemed colleagues," Drahorn began, his voice dripping with the kind of condescension usually reserved for explaining basic mathematics to particularly slow children. "We gather today to discuss the most primitive species our scouts have encountered in 3 centuries, humans." The word rolled off his tongue like a particularly distasteful piece of expired protein paste. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 47 different species leaned forward in their bio-adaptive chairs. The air recyclers hummed quietly, working overtime to filter out the mixture of pheromones, gases, and general smugness that filled the room. "Their technology is laughably backwards," Drahorn continued, activating a holographic display that showed Earth spinning lazily in space. "Chemical rockets, fossil fuels. They still use something called the Internet, which is apparently just a collection of cat videos and arguments about food preparation." A ripple of what passed for laughter among beings with respiratory systems ranging from gill slits to atmospheric filters echoed through the chamber. General Krafnog, whose species resembled oversized lizards with management degrees, slapped his scaled knee in amusement. "Admiral," interrupted Judge Quintara, the tribunal's chief legal officer, "what strategic value does this backwater planet actually possess?" Her tone suggested she already knew the answer, and found it mildly disappointing. Drahorn's eyes brightened, literally, as his bioluminescent organs responded to his excitement. "Ah, my dear Judge, that is precisely why we are here. Their planet contains enough rare minerals to power our fleets for the next millennium: lithium, cobalt, platinum, and something they call oil, which they apparently burn for entertainment." "And their military capabilities?" asked Quartermaster A, whose species had evolved beyond individual names because, frankly, they considered personal identity inefficient. "Negligible." Drahorn waved dismissively with 2 of his arms, while the other 2 brought up tactical displays. "Their most advanced weapons are nuclear devices that they point at themselves. They have never achieved faster than light travel. Their largest military vessels are primitive metal constructs that float on water like bathtub toys." The holographic display shifted to show various human military installations. Drahorn zoomed in on aircraft carriers, with the enthusiasm of a xenobiologist, examining particularly amusing bacteria. "Look at this," he chuckled. "They built floating cities just to park their tiny atmospheric fighters on. The inefficiency is breathtaking. Our smallest patrol craft could disable their entire planetary defense grid during a lunch break." "So," rumbled Admiral Vashi, whose gravelly voice made even casual conversation sound like a geological event, "you are proposing we simply take their planet." "Take it." Drahorn's laugh was the sound of wind chimes made from broken glass. "My dear Admiral, I am proposing we give them the honor of mining their own world for us. Think of the efficiency. We establish orbital platforms, demonstrate our technological superiority, and they hand over their resources in exchange for not being reduced to their component atoms." The motion passed unanimously, because nothing builds confidence like a completely one-sided vote against a species that was not present to defend itself. "Excellent," Drahorn declared, already mentally composing his victory speech. "I shall personally oversee the subjugation. Prepare the 19th Fleet. We shall show these humans what happens when a primitive species encounters the glory of the Zeltharian Empire." Within hours, 3,000 warships began their journey toward a small blue planet, whose inhabitants were about to learn a very important lesson about the dangers of being underestimated. 3 days later, Admiral Drahorn found himself face to face with humanity's representative, and he had to admit he was somewhat disappointed. After all the build-up about this primitive species, he had expected something more impressive than a middle-aged woman in a simple black suit who looked like she managed office supplies for a living. Ambassador Amy Kowalski stood barely 5.5 feet tall, with graying brown hair pulled back in what humans apparently called a practical style. She carried a single briefcase, and wore an expression that suggested she had dealt with difficult customers before. Drahorn towered over her by 18 inches, which should have been intimidating, but somehow, Amy managed to look like she was the one doing him a favor by showing up. "Ambassador Kowalski," Drahorn began, using his most patronizing tone. How refreshing to finally meet a representative of your species. I trust your journey from Earth was not too taxing for your primitive vessels. Amy smiled politely, the way customer service representatives smile at people who demand to speak to the manager. Actually, Admiral, we hitchhiked with some traders from the Centauri system. Lovely folks. They were curious about human coffee, so we worked out an arrangement. The fact that she seemed completely unfazed by being surrounded by beings who could crush her species like insects was either admirable stupidity or something else entirely. Drahorn chose to assume it was stupidity, because the alternative would require him to reconsider his entire worldview, and he had a schedule to keep. How wonderfully resourceful, he said, managing to make resourcefulness sound like a character defect. Now, shall we discuss the terms of your planet's transition to Zeltharian management? I think there might be some confusion here, Amy replied, opening her briefcase with the calm efficiency of someone about to explain why their insurance claim had been denied. We understood this was a diplomatic meeting to establish peaceful relations between our species. Judge Quintara leaned forward from her position at the negotiation table, her pale blue skin shifting to a slightly darker shade that indicated either amusement or digestive distress. Ambassador, there has been no confusion. Your species has been evaluated according to Galactic Statute 42B, which clearly states that any civilization lacking faster-than-light capability may be designated as a protectorate under more advanced species. It is really quite generous, added Drahorn, because apparently he thought adding insult to injury was good diplomacy. We will establish orbital facilities to oversee the extraction of your planet's resources. Your people will be provided with appropriate housing and work assignments. Think of it as a promotion from your current status as an unrecognized species to valued contributors to galactic civilization. Amy nodded thoughtfully, as if she were considering a timeshare presentation from someone wearing an obviously fake smile. That is indeed generous. However, I should probably mention that Earth's government has reviewed your proposal, and we must respectfully decline. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that occurs when someone says something so unexpected that everyone present needs a moment to process whether they heard correctly. Drahorn blinked all four eyes in sequence, a Zeltharian expression of confusion that roughly translated to "Please repeat that ridiculous thing you just said." Decline, he repeated, as if the word was in a foreign language he had never heard before. Yes, Amy said simply. We prefer to remain independent. However, we are certainly open to trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and mutual defense treaties. We have prepared several proposals that I think you will find quite reasonable. Judge Quintara's skin shifted to a deep purple, which in her species indicated either extreme anger or a severe allergic reaction. Ambassador, you seem to misunderstand your situation. This was not a negotiation. This was an announcement of your new status. Oh, Amy said, in the tone of someone who had just realized they had been talking to a particularly aggressive telemarketer. Well, in that case, I am authorized to inform you that any attempt to implement your proposal will be met with appropriate defensive measures. Drahorn's laughter was the sound of industrial machinery having a nervous breakdown. Defensive measures, my dear primitive creature? We have 3,000 warships capable of reducing your entire planet to space dust. What could you possibly do to defend yourselves? Amy smiled again, and for just a moment, something flickered behind her eyes that made Drahorn suddenly uncomfortable. Admiral, that sounds like a threat against Earth and its citizens. Are you absolutely certain you want to make threats against humans? 48 hours, Drahorn announced. Because apparently he had mistaken Amy's warning for a bluff. You have 48 hours to reconsider your position. After that, we will demonstrate why cooperation is preferable to resistance. Amy closed her briefcase with a soft click. Well, that is unfortunate. I really had hoped we could work something out. From the comfort of his flagship's observation deck, Admiral Drahorn watched with smug satisfaction as his spy networks reported the delicious chaos unfolding across Earth. The planet's surface practically buzzed with frantic activity, and every intercepted transmission confirmed what he already knew. Humans were scared, desperate, and completely out of their depth. Admiral, reported his intelligence officer, a spider-like creature whose 8 eyes gleamed with excitement. Our surveillance probes are detecting massive military mobilization across all human continents. Their armed forces appear to be in complete disarray. Excellent. Drahorn purred. because apparently he had confused terrified scrambling with actual military preparation. Show me their pathetic attempts at resistance. The main display flickered to life, showing feeds from across Earth's surface. Drahorn rubbed his hands together in anticipation, expecting to see primitive humans running around like frightened prey animals. What he saw instead was Commander Tom Mali, Earth's military coordinator, standing in what appeared to be a hastily converted shopping mall, surrounded by boxes, cables, and humans in uniform, who seemed to be having some sort of collective nervous breakdown. General, Mali was saying into a communication device, his voice crackling with what sounded like barely controlled panic. I need those shipments moved to Sector 7 immediately, and for the love of all that is holy, someone please tell me why half our equipment is still in packaging. Drahorn chuckled. The human military leader was clearly overwhelmed. His facility looked like a warehouse explosion had been organized by committee, and his personnel were rushing around with the coordinated efficiency of caffeinated squirrels. Their command structure is already collapsing, observed General Krafnog, who had been studying human military doctrine with the enthusiasm of someone reading children's books. Look at how their commander Mali gesticulates wildly. Classic signs of leadership failure under pressure. On the screen, Mali was indeed gesticulating, primarily at a massive crate that seemed to require 17 different people to move 3 feet. What do you mean it needs a special key? Who designs equipment that needs a special key? And why is that key apparently located in a completely different facility? Sir, one of Mali's subordinates reported. We have confirmation that Package 17 has been delivered to the Alaska facility, but Package 18 is somehow in Antarctica, and nobody knows where Package 19 went. Mali ran his hands through his hair in a gesture that Drahorn recognized as universal despair. Find Package 19. I don't care if you have to check every postal service on the planet. And someone please explain to me why our most critical equipment was shipped via what appears to be the galactic equivalent of a garage sale. Krafnog's scaled features arranged themselves into what passed for a smile among his species. Their logistics are completely incompetent. They cannot even track their own supplies. This will be easier than conquering a planet of particularly dim-witted herbivores. Quartermaster A's report arrived precisely on schedule, because punctuality was one of the few things his species had perfected. Admiral, based on intercepted human communications, I have compiled a comprehensive list of resources we can expect to acquire within the first week of occupation. The holographic display updated to show Earth's continents with glowing markers indicating mineral deposits, population centers and industrial facilities. Quartermaster A had even included helpful charts showing projected mining outputs and labor allocation schedules. Notice how their military facilities are concentrated in easily identifiable locations, he noted with professional satisfaction. Their Pentagon, NORAD, and similar installations are clearly marked on their own communication networks. They have essentially provided us with a complete targeting list. Meanwhile, the surveillance feeds continued to show humans scurrying around like they were preparing for the galaxy's most disorganized yard sale. Military convoys moved in seemingly random directions. Aircraft took off and landed at facilities that had no obvious strategic value, and personnel appeared to be having heated arguments about everything from equipment manuals to lunch schedules. Sir, Mali was saying to someone off-screen, I need you to explain to me, using small words and possibly hand puppets, why our defensive grid requires components that were apparently manufactured by 17 different species across 12 different star systems. Because, came the reply from a voice that sounded tired enough to power a small city. The previous administration thought it would be more cost-effective to outsource our defense systems to the lowest bidder. Mali's expression suggested he was contemplating the career benefits of early retirement, and the installation manual, written in a language that went extinct 300 years ago. Drahorn's laughter filled the observation deck. They are trying to assemble defensive systems they cannot even understand. This is better than I had hoped. Their own incompetence will do half our work for us. The surveillance feed showed more of the same. Humans running around, moving things from one place to another, and having what appeared to be heated discussions about technical specifications that clearly exceeded their primitive understanding. Admiral, his communication officer announced, we are receiving multiple distress signals from various human governments. They appear to be requesting assistance from other galactic species. And the responses? Universal laughter, sir. The galactic community finds the idea of humans mounting any meaningful resistance to be quite amusing. Drawhorn settled back in his command chair, feeling the warm glow of inevitable victory. In 36 hours, he would demonstrate to the galaxy why the Zeltharian Empire remained the dominant military force in known space, and humans would provide a textbook example of what happened when primitive species tried to play in the big leagues. 48 hours later, Admiral Vashi led the first wave of the invasion fleet toward Earth, with the confidence of someone who had never encountered a problem that could not be solved by applying overwhelming firepower. His dreadnought, the inevitable conclusion, emerged from hyperspace along with 200 escort vessels, their hulls gleaming like deadly jewelry against the starfield. Scanning the system now, reported his tactical officer, a being whose species had evolved from predatory fish and retained an impressive collection of teeth. Initial readings show minimal defensive presence, a few orbital stations, some communication satellites, and what appears to be a collection of primitive space debris. Vashi nodded approvingly. Through the massive viewports of his bridge, Earth hung before them like a blue and white marble, looking exactly as defenseless as their intelligence had predicted. No massive defense platforms, no energy shields, no fleets of warships rising to meet them. Just a small, quiet planet that was about to learn why resistance was futile. Excellent, Vashi rumbled, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a job that was already half finished. Begin standard invasion protocol. Disable their communication networks, neutralize any military installations, and prepare for orbital bombardment of their major population centers. This should take approximately 15 minutes. The first wave of Zeltharian fighters screamed toward Earth's atmosphere, their energy weapons charging with the distinctive whine that had terrified dozens of species across the galaxy. Behind them, the main fleet spread out in perfect formation, each captain eager to claim their share of the glory. "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "we are detecting some kind of broadcast from the planet's surface." "Put it through," Vashi ordered, expecting to hear the usual mix of surrender offers, pleas for mercy, and general panic that accompanied the conquest of primitive worlds. Instead, Commander Mali's voice filled the bridge, sounding remarkably calm for someone whose planet was about to be invaded. "Attention Zeltharian fleet, this is Earth Defense Command. You are entering restricted space. Please alter course immediately or face the consequences." The bridge erupted in laughter. Even the normally serious tactical officer made a sound that might have been amusement if his species had possessed a sense of humor. "Consequences." Vashi wiped moisture from his eyes. "Did they just threaten us with consequences?" "Send a response. Tell them their consequences have arrived." The first wave of fighters reached Earth's outer atmosphere without encountering so much as a weather balloon. Their sensors detected the same pathetic collection of primitive satellites and space stations that had been identified during reconnaissance. A few small vessels that appeared to be commercial transports scattered like startled fish, which was exactly the kind of behavior Vashi had expected from a species that had never experienced real warfare. "First wave reporting successful penetration of enemy airspace," announced the communication officer. "No resistance encountered. Beginning target acquisition on major population centers." "Phase 2, commence bombardment," Vashi ordered, because apparently he believed in the importance of maintaining proper military terminology even when conquering defenseless planets. That was when everything went sideways, upside down, and through several dimensions that Zeltharian physics had not yet discovered. The first indication that something was wrong came when Lieutenant Korthax, piloting the lead fighter, reported what sounded like a technical malfunction. "Command, I am showing massive energy signatures appearing across the planet's surface. This cannot be correct. The readings suggest weapons platforms with power outputs exceeding our dreadnought's main batteries." "Recalibrate your sensors," Vashi replied dismissively. "Primitive planets do not possess weapons that exceed our specifications." "Sir," Korthax's voice carried a note of confusion, "the signatures are not just appearing, they are targeting us. I repeat, Earth appears to have weapons systems that are actively locking onto our positions." Before Vashi could respond, Earth's surface lit up like a festival of destruction. What had appeared to be empty fields, harmless mountains, and peaceful ocean areas suddenly revealed themselves to be camouflaged weapons installations of a scale that defied everything Zeltharian intelligence had reported. "Impossible," breathed the tactical officer, his multiple rows of teeth chattering in disbelief. "Those energy signatures are reading higher than anything in our database. How did they hide installations of this magnitude?" The answer became clear as the first human weapons fired. and Vashi realized with growing horror that Earth had not been defenseless. Earth had been patient. Massive energy beams, each one capable of vaporizing a battleship, reached out from the planet's surface with the precision of surgical instruments and the power of dying stars. The lead wave of Zoltharian fighters simply ceased to exist, not destroyed so much as fundamentally disagreed with by the universe itself. Evasive maneuvers, Vashi shouted, but evasive maneuvers were somewhat difficult when the enemy weapons seemed to predict exactly where each ship would attempt to evade to. Sir, his communication officer reported with the kind of calm professionalism that comes from shock so severe it circles back to serenity. We are receiving a transmission from the planet. Commander Mali's voice returned, still sounding annoyingly composed. Zoltharian fleet, you were warned. We really would have preferred to handle this diplomatically. However, since you have chosen to interpret our peaceful nature as weakness, we will now demonstrate why that was a serious error in judgment. How? Vashi demanded, watching in fascination as more of his ships disappeared in bursts of light. How did you hide weapons of this capability? Our sensors detected nothing, Admiral, Mali replied, and Vashi could swear he heard the man smiling. Your sensors detected exactly what we wanted them to detect. Did you really think a species that has survived ice ages, plagues, world wars and reality television would not have learned something about planning for uninvited guests? The space around Earth had become a light show of destruction, with Zoltharian vessels exploding in carefully orchestrated sequence. What had begun as a textbook invasion had transformed into something that would require an entirely new classification in military databases, assuming anyone survived to write the reports. Retreat, Vashi ordered, because sometimes tactical withdrawal was the better part of not being completely annihilated. All ships, fall back to hyperspace distance and regroup. That was when they discovered that retreat was no longer an option, because humans had apparently thought of that possibility too. What Admiral Vashi discovered, to his rapidly increasing dismay, was that humans had not simply hidden weapons on their planet. They had turned their entire solar system into the galaxy's most elaborate and lethal practical joke, and the Zoltharian Empire was the punchline. Sir, his navigation officer reported with the tone of someone delivering news about a terminal diagnosis. Hyperspace jump engines are not responding. We appear to be caught in some kind of interference field. Interference field, Vashi demanded, watching another squadron of his fighters get deleted from existence by weapons that should not have been possible. What kind of interference field? The answer came from an unexpected source. A new voice joined their communication channel, speaking with the calm authority of someone who had been planning this conversation for quite some time. Admiral Vashi, this is Captain Brandon Torres of the Earth Defense Force. I apologize for the inconvenience, but we have temporarily disabled your hyperspace capabilities. Please remain calm while we demonstrate why threatening Earth was not your best decision. Torres sounded like a customer service representative explaining why a warranty claim had been denied, which somehow made the situation even more terrifying. Through the bridge's main viewer, Vashi could see new ships emerging from what had appeared to be empty space. Human vessels that defied every principle of ship design he had ever studied, moving with impossible grace and bristling with weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics into uncomfortable positions. Impossible, whispered his tactical officer. Those ships are using technology that predates their species by millions of years. Where did they acquire temporal stabilizers, quantum disruptors, gravitational inversors? Torres' voice returned, carrying a note of what sounded suspiciously like amusement. Admiral, your intelligence reports mentioned that humans lack faster-than-light travel. This was technically accurate, but perhaps not in the way you intended. We do not use faster-than-light travel because we discovered something considerably more efficient. As if summoned by his words, space around the Zoltharian fleet began to fold in ways that made Vashi's brain hurt. Human ships appeared from directions that did not exist, emerging from dimensional gaps that his sensors insisted were impossible. You see, Torres continued, his voice now coming from speakers throughout the Zoltharian fleet, as human hackers apparently decided that privacy was overrated. While you were developing bigger engines to go faster, we developed better mathematics to go smarter. Why travel through space when you can convince space to rearrange itself around you? Each Zoltharian vessel found itself facing weapons, specifically designed to counter their particular defensive systems, as if humans had studied their technology and decided to write a very pointed critique. How did you know our shield frequencies? Vashi demanded, watching his flagship's defenses fail in sequence as human weapons bypassed them with insulting ease. Admiral, Torres replied. Your species has been using the same basic shield configuration for 3,000 years. We spent 6 months reverse engineering it from your own communication protocols. Did you know your ships broadcast their defensive specifications every time they perform maintenance cycles? Vashi did not know that, and was beginning to suspect there were many things about humans that Zeltharian intelligence had failed to discover, such as their apparent ability to hack enemy communications from across solar systems, or their tendency to weaponize mathematical concepts that most species used for abstract theoretical discussions. Fall back to the outer system. Vashi ordered his remaining ships, because tactical retreat seemed preferable to continuing to serve as target practice for beings who had apparently turned warfare into an exact science. I am afraid that will not be possible, Torres announced. You see, Admiral, when you threatened Earth, you did not just threaten one planet, you threatened humans. And humans, as you are about to learn, do not limit themselves to a single world. The Zeltharian fleet's sensors began detecting human ships throughout the solar system, not just around Earth, but stationed near every planet, asteroid, and significant gravitational body. Ships that had been waiting, cloaked, for exactly this scenario. This is impossible, Vashi repeated, because apparently his vocabulary had been reduced to variations on that single theme. Human colonization extends to only 3 systems. Our intelligence confirmed this. Your intelligence, Torres said, with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a particularly slow student, detected exactly what we wanted it to detect. Human colonization extends considerably further than 3 systems. We simply prefer that aggressive species not know the exact details of our expansion. The truth hit Vashi like a physics textbook thrown by an angry universe. Humans had not been caught unprepared by the Zeltharian invasion. They had been expecting it, planning for it, and preparing countermeasures that turned the entire concept of invasion into an exercise in futility. Surrender, Vashi transmitted on all frequencies, because survival suddenly seemed more important than military honor. We surrender unconditionally. Surrender, Torres's voice carried genuine surprise. Admiral, I think there has been a misunderstanding. This is not a battle. This is a demonstration. You threatened to reduce Earth to space dust. We are now demonstrating what happens when someone threatens humans. That was when the real horror began. Human ships began pursuing the fleeing Zeltharian vessels not just through the solar system, but through hyperspace itself. Ships that should not have been able to follow hyperspace jumps appeared wherever the Zeltharians attempted to retreat, as if humans had somehow figured out how to predict their destinations. How are they following us through hyperspace? Demanded his navigation officer. The answer came from a new human voice, younger but equally confident. Lieutenant Amy Kowalski, Earth Defense Force. Hyperspace navigation follows predictable mathematical patterns. We calculated your most likely retreat routes approximately 6 months ago and positioned intercept teams accordingly. Vashi realized with growing terror that the humans were not just defeating his invasion force. They were systematically hunting down every ship that had participated in the attack, pursuing them across multiple star systems with the relentless efficiency of a species that had apparently turned revenge into a science. This is impossible, he whispered one final time, watching his fleet dissolve under the precise application of human ingenuity. Admiral, Torres replied, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. 6 months later, in a dingy cantina on the edge of charted space, 2 survivors of the Zeltharian Empire's greatest military disaster sat hunched over drinks that could strip paint from starship hulls. General Morin and Admiral Morton had once commanded fleets that made entire star systems tremble. Now they jumped at shadows and paid their bar tabs with fake identification chips. Did you hear? Morin whispered, his voice carrying the haunted quality of someone who had seen his entire worldview exploded by beings who used mathematics as a weapon. The Krillian hegemony just announced a formal apology to Earth for that mining dispute from last year. Morton nodded grimly, his 4 eyes scanning the cantina for any sign of the sleek, impossible ships that had been appearing throughout the galaxy wherever humans had been threatened. Smart of them. The hegemony learned from our mistake. The mistake in question had resulted in the complete dissolution of the Zeltharian Empire, the establishment of Earth as a galactic power that nobody wanted to annoy, and the creation of a new entry in the Universal Species database that simply read, humans, do not threaten. Seriously. We cannot stress this enough. I still do not understand how they did it, Morin muttered, staring into his drink as if it might contain answers to questions that kept him awake at night. 3,000 ships. 3,000. Gone in less than 6 hours. The worst part, Morton replied, was the efficiency. No dramatic speeches, no gloating, no unnecessary cruelty. They simply explained what they were doing, and why, then did it with the kind of professional competence usually reserved for filing taxes. Around the cantina, representatives from dozens of species sat in hushed conversations, sharing the same story with variations. The tale of the species that had appeared harmless, primitive and defenseless, right up until the moment someone had been foolish enough to threaten them. The Galactic Council has issued new guidelines, Moran reported. All first contact protocols now include a mandatory section titled How to Avoid Accidentally Declaring War on Humans. It is apparently a longer document than the entire previous first contact manual. Morton's laugh was the sound of broken glass trying to be cheerful. Did you know that humans had colonized 47 star systems before anyone realized they had left their home planet? 47. Their camouflage technology is so advanced that they convinced the entire galaxy they were a single-planet species while simultaneously building an interstellar empire. The cantina's wall-mounted news display flickered to show the latest galactic headlines. The top story featured Ambassador Amy Kowalski accepting a trade agreement with the Centauri Federation, looking exactly as unremarkable as she had during that fatal first contact meeting. The headline read, Earth signs mutual defense pact with 17 systems. 17 systems, Moran repeated numbly. 6 months ago nobody thought humans were worth defending. Now they have mutual defense pacts with half the galaxy. The real joke, Morton said, finishing his drink with the resignation of someone who had learned too late that the universe had a sense of humor, is that they were telling the truth about being peaceful. Earth really did want diplomatic relations, trade agreements, and cultural exchanges. Right up until we threatened them. Right up until we threatened them, Morton agreed. The cantina's communication system crackled to life with the daily Galactic Advisory Bulletin. The automated voice delivered the same message that had been broadcast across known space every day for the past 6 months. Attention all spacefaring species. Please be advised that humans consider threats against their colonies, citizens, or allies to be acts of war. Humans define threats very broadly, and respond to them very specifically. When in doubt, try diplomacy. It has an excellent success rate, and significantly lower casualty statistics. The message concluded with the new unofficial galactic motto that had emerged from the ashes of the Zeltharian Empire. Earth, the only species that turned being underestimated into a tactical advantage. Moran and Morton sat in silence, contemplating a universe where the most dangerous predators looked like accountants, and turned mathematics into weapons of mass destruction. Outside the cantina, a sleek human vessel docked at the station, its hull bearing the simple inscription, Diplomatic Corps. The 2 survivors finished their drinks and quietly left through the back exit, because even 6 months later seeing humans in person still made them nervous. Some lessons they had learned were too expensive to forget.